This is Hunt Nebraska, the official podcast for insight into Nebraska's hunting and shooting sports community. Be sure to give us a follow on Facebook, our space for sharing stories, information, tips, and techniques. Now, Hunt Nebraska.
And a big welcome back into the Hunt Nebraska cabin to everybody out there listening or watching us on YouTube. We definitely appreciate that. It's been a while since we've been able to sit down here in the cabin and get any semblance of a group together, and we're glad we're able to make it happen today real fast. We got the Jeff Rawlinson, Nebraska Game and Parks. We got Michael Addison currently with the National Wild Turkey Federation.
Yep.
R3 coordinator here in the state of Nebraska. We've got the Nebraska Hunter Education Coordinator, Kyle Gaston, right here, and me, Hershy. And we're having fun today. We're officially knee deep, if not a little bit more, into the actual off season. The neat thing here in Nebraska, folks, and part of the reason we all love living here is there's more days you can hunt than we don't hunt. But we are in the month of June, July. That's kind of the time to get ready for what happens August through May each year. So we're going to have fun. As you can see, this is going to be one of our sharpest podcasts ever if you're watching us on YouTube. If you're listening to us on one of the audio platforms, we appreciate you taking us along for the ride or into the office, the home, wherever you might be listening to us. But you might miss out just a little bit on seeing some of the cool props that we brought. And we are going to talk about knives, hunting knives, camping knives, because we're definitely into the camping season. And since Patty might be listening, perhaps some knives, hunting knives that can be accidentally used on, to flay a fish.
Accidentally.
Not
fishing, the intended purpose.
Exactly.
Yes,
exactly. Yes. Fishing only as it relates to hunting. But we're talking about knives because one of the things we found in our discussions in the hallway, out in the field, we have some similarities when it comes to what we like to use in a knife out there in the field. We have plenty of differences, but one of the things we often get asked about is, well, what knife do you suggest I get? What knife is the best? And a lot of different options out there, but one of the biggest things we're also going to get into is sharpening. Because if you don't have a sharp knife, guess what? Might as well be spreading butter.
It's a butter knife at that point. It really is.
It is. And we're going to say it many times, the most dangerous type of knife is
a dull knife.
A dull knife. That's right. Exactly. So I'm not exactly sure where to start other than it looks like we might have to start with Jeff because it looks like he brought the most knives.
I just grabbed a handful out of the pile.
We got to squeeze this all into, that 40-minute slot that we normally have. Let's talk about now that we're in the off season, Jeff. Which of these knives on the table are you going to use the most? Which one are you going to have with you the most?
There's no question about it. The fillet knife.
The
is
fillet
my most
knife.
used knife of all. It's the one that I probably have to sharpen the most. It's the one that I absolutely use on game the most. This is one of my absolute favorites. I've got a few fillet knives, but this is my Schrade Uncle Henry. Now, they used to make these in the USA, and then they farmed them out to China years ago. If you can find the USA blades, this is a really hard, good steel blade, and I think they fetch a premium nowadays. They're probably in that $60, $80 range for the USA made versions. But
is that a 7-inch blade on
7-inch blade, which is what I prefer. Now, I've got fillet knives with shorter blades on it, and they're handy, but you can see it by the time you get to a 7-inch blade, it sweeps up a little bit, and I've kind of sharpened it up that way a little bit. But what's really cool about this swept blade is a lot of the intricate work you might be doing is this is the most used part of the blade right up here, and so I use this. Sometimes I use it on fish. But most of the time, this is being used on game birds, on small game, deer. There's just nothing, in my opinion, that replaces a fillet knife for that intricate work when you're filleting the breast meat off of the keel or whatever.
That's an excellent point. That's 7-inch blade length is pretty darn versatile, and like you said, you can kind of add to it. Now this one here, if it's not identical, it's darn close. This is a folding fillet knife.
With a replaceable blade, or is that
right here? This has got slightly shorter blade, but I think it is the one, or very similar to the one that we put into those spring turkey hunting mystery boxes back in 2020. maybe 21, when we were going through and couldn't do in-person programs at all. We put together a spring turkey hunting box and with a lot of different things that you need to go out and be successful with. And then we did some programs online with that. We put in this folding knife because a couple of different reasons. One, it fit in the box a lot easier. Two, pretty darn versatile and handy. Now, usually I don't go with a foldable fillet knife when I've got it, when I'm just reaching for something there at the house or at the cabin or what have you. However, they are darn portable. And these here, not to drop any names, folks, but this blade here is Outdoor Edge. Great supporter of hunter education,
Yes,
by
they
the
are.
way. And I think that's how we ended up with them. Wow. I was impressed with what we were putting in the mystery box.
Good little blade, huh?
And it was, it's one of those that I had to go grab one for myself just to have, because sometimes the one drawback, if there's any, to a nice long fillet knife is when it's fixed blade, it takes up space.
Yes, it does.
And it whether it's in the backpack, I usually don't take it anywhere too far, but if you've got to go on a trip, camping trip, whatever, there's some space, and you definitely don't want to cause any damage, but that flexible blade.
Well, that's the key.
That's nice.
The spine on what separates a fillet knife out from every other blade, in my opinion. Yeah, they can be long and short. They can have hardly any size. Like this one's probably a 1/2 inch in depth.
Yeah, that's pretty skinny right up top.
Well, it's gotten sharpened a lot over the years. But the beauty of this puppy here is that, any good fillet knife is the spine. You should be able to take a fillet knife and lay it flat on the ground, not the handle in the air, but the knife's flat on the ground. And so when you're filleting those fillets off,
game,
fillets off of a fish, you're right up against the skin, and it's amazing with a good spine how easy it is, just nice big strokes, and it just goes right across the tablecloth, and it just goes right up on top of that skin.
Just put a cut in the first cut in our table here.
I don't even see it. I think you're wrong. I don't see a cut there
I
at
definitely saw that knife go
You just
in.
need to stick with your control box over there. Hey, sharpen this for me. Apparently, it's cut some linen.
Now, you
Apparently so.
mentioned harder steel, and that's something we can probably get into here in a little bit. But the nice thing about a lot of fillet knives is easy to keep their edge.
Absolutely.
They're not doing a lot of hard work about going through bone or cutting feathers or anything like that. So they're easier to, in my opinion, to kind of keep a good edge on.
Yep, absolutely. They touch up easy. You're usually just using a real fine honing stone. You're not resetting the edge on these hardly ever, and you're just kind of honing them, keeping them nice and razor sharp. And they should be just about razor sharp. But it's amazing the intricate work you can do on, like I said, either it's bird fillets or fish fillets. The amount of intricate work you can do with these things is pretty impressive.
So that's the one you're going to be around the most right now, other than the pocket knife. We're not talking
the old pocket knife's
now.
always in the pocket, but this gets used the most. It was probably 3/4 of an inch or deeper when I first bought it, so I've used taken quite a bit off of it.
Started out as an 8-inch too, folks.
Well,
and it's
I'll tell you, all the years doing those carporamas took its toll on this puppy here, because you'd have to carp those bones. You are dealing with some bones on those carp, and so I'd always be having to sharpen this thing during those, and it'd take off some metal.
Just those scales. I mean, you've got to get around those scales.
Yeah.
That's some good armor.
Nothing dulls a knife about
They
faster
do.
than scales.
I try to get up underneath the scales and then turn the blade back in and go down into the fillet. And usually I can do that. With carp, you're cutting something. You're always cutting a scale or something.
That is the truth. So good knife there,
and a good sheath. All knives ought to have a decent sheath. Whether I don't care if it's made of denier or whatever or leather. I like leather. Yeah. I think good leather sheaths, but something to carry the knife and protect it in. When I'm on the boat fishing all day long, I might have this on my hip even.
Which is a good point, because it does make them a little bit more usable. You can take them with you. Especially if it doesn't fold up, and that's kind of the thought behind those folding knives. But I got one, and it wasn't very big. It probably had a 5-inch blade on it, nice sharp fillet knife that I used for, and still think I have it, for pheasants, like you said, deboning pheasants and quail, and probably some teal and stuff in there as well. But I found that it didn't come with a sheath. It didn't have anything to carry it around with. So if I wasn't cutting up a critter there at the house, it wasn't going anywhere.
Yeah.
Because, I mean,
Sure.
it just makes no sense. Why would you ever have a knife without a sheath and a fixed blade? Because it's either going to get dulled or it's going to cut stuff or it's going to do both.
Yep.
While you don't want it to. So now we're going to go from that to Michael. You've got a collection of 3 over there.
Yeah, so I've got a fillet knife.
Okay.
It's also outdoor edge. Just comes as part of. They've got those those box sets of different game knives you can get. So I just like that because you get a variety of stuff. But this one's I think either a 5 or 6 inch fillet knife, not quite as long and spindly as Jeff's, but it's good for, of course, turkeys, blend birds, the occasional fish that might find its way somehow into your hands. Don't know how that happens when we're hunting, but sometimes it does.
And a samurai sword.
And, well, this one they call this one, looks like it says on the name, butcher, kind of butcher knife,
Yeah,
but
it's a butcher shop knife.
kind of
That's
more
a nickname, folks, because if you're not watching, this is a mini machete.
It really is. It's
kind of
a meat cleaver / machete. All in one.
kind of that bowie or machete style knife almost, which that's good for if you're hacking up some big game, trying to cut the quarters off.
That's not a knife. That's a knife. That's a knife.
That's a knife.
That's not a knife. That's a knife.
But that's a good one for cutting up your big game there, just doing big pieces. We're not doing fine work with
That's
that.
got some nice heft to it on the front end there.
Yeah,
Oh,
that one's
does.
got some weight to it. Definitely
there at the end.
definitely
I'm a
used
fan.
for
It's got a nice grippy grip there.
Yeah, it's
on
a
the
good,
handle.
good blood grip.
good big
Yeah.
cuts.
Good blood grip.
Is what that one's good for. But the knife that I'm most often had, I know you said we weren't talking folding knives, but really,
Oh, no, I
or
didn't
pocket
say that.
knives. But this Cold Steel Voyager, it's a 4-inch, and it's my favorite blade shape is this drop point. It's really versatile, and I always carry this to me with the woods just in case I need it in the pinch. Whether I need to cut something or if need to cut something up. I can still do some. You can take this point here and do a little bit of fine work in there, but you can also get some bigger cuts through hide or flesh or what have you with this, and it's really solid
That's
lock
a solid
system.
knife. Why do you like the drop point so much?
I just like it. I can do a lot with it. You can use it in a pinch. I wouldn't always use it, but you can hack with it. You can do some finer cutting with it. Sure. It got a nice thick spine on it, so it can take some abuse if needed. It's just a good solid all around knife and knife shape. Yeah. So I like the 4-inch. This is one I'm usually taking with me to the woods. The bigger 4-inch pocket knife versus some of the smaller ones. But that's whether I'm doing anything. Usually, anytime I'm outside fishing or hunting or shooting, even I've got this knife with me.
That's your all-purpose knife.
That's my all-purpose go-to for just about anything knife.
Well, Jeff, and I know that you have an all-purpose knife, but before we get to that one or a couple of those, do you have an all-purpose knife, Kyle?
I do. That's one of the ones here. It's a Kershaw knife that I got. I use it all the time when I was in law enforcement. It was my kind of go-to for whatever I might need something. My favorite aspect of it, though.
Wait a second. Jeff just pulled out another knife. Are you knifeless at home now, or is this just the carry pack?
This is just shelf. The
This
first
is
shelf.
just this is the
This is
travel.
just the top shelf. I got several shelves.
Do you not see the bag over there? They just keeps just keeps pulling out of it.
I just rated the top shelf. I didn't go the 6 below.
I did. I just figured that oh crap, where's my deer knife? Well, it's in my deer backpack, so he grabbed that. Yep. But no, that's full. Okay, all right.
Well, no, I like the quick release. So sometimes I'm busy. One hand's full of stuff, so you just pull the lever,
which is pretty cool. It's just something cool about that in there.
Especially when you got a deer down, you're like, all right.
Exactly.
So you're at camp. We got to tie. We got to cut this rope. And we got a knife. Yep.
I think these guys have different uses for their knives than you and I do. Got a squirrel down. I mean, it's an interesting conundrum. It really is.
But it was one of my favorite things, just for an all-around purpose knife, to have something around, something that was held up multiple years of abuse, and it still works just fine. It's easy to keep sharp the whole during that time. But and then
no, you got to open that one again. That's just it's fun. Yeah, that's neat.
Do you need to give it a try there?
Jeff,
he's gonna cut himself.
And, there you go. Swings pretty well.
That's the fun thing about those is it doesn't matter who it and give it to any guy. We'll just play with it. We'll just do that. Just sit there and play with
I
it.
think part of it is, and Kyle and Michael, maybe it wasn't as cool, but I remember being a kid growing up. There was this almost mythical thing that we talked about called the Switchblade.
Oh yeah,
And
you saw that in movies.
Oh, and did you know the Switchblade is illegal? And then you'd have somebody in the back. My dad's got one. and just all that. My dad had a Switchblade that was a comb, the switch comb type thing, but it had kind of an aura to it, and we're not supposed to have them. But these things kind of add to that mystique, that wide open and ready to go. And part of it serves a purpose, right? Because it locks into place. And that's kind of like that inertia-driven shotgun. It's got to slam into the spot so that it locks.
Yep. So
And nice and strong. And Kershaw, good name.
Yeah, oh,
Good
for
name.
sure.
And it's fun to say.
Oh, that's cool.
So that's your go-to all-purpose knife. So what's the next one that looks kind of like it?
So
folding
next
black one.
is I thought we'd just bring it back for a history. This was actually my first knife that I got when I got to the age of hunting. My dad got that for me.
Wow.
Obviously a buck knife. I think I see you have a buck knife over there as well.
Oh, I do. I did bring it.
But so that was the first one I got. That's for you.
Oh, I
you know,
did.
used it.
I didn't even know it was one of my
I was
favorites.
like-
gun. Cool. I didn't know.
I was thinking about that. I was like, I wish I would have brought it. And then he told me I did.
I did bring it. I got lost in 3 knives over there. I got sidetracked.
I'm just in awe of the pile going on here. It's like we started our trade show, folks.
So
This one's 300. This one's
Come by to the Outdoor Education Center today for our annual gun and knife show.
Nice, not included.
But anyways, first one, kind of a history. Just had it for skinning my first deer with it. First buck knife, that type of a history of what my dad got me when I started getting into
That's
hunting
pretty
and all
cool.
that. So that was the
was
history of it. It's a
nice
little bit
stout
bulkier
blade.
though. And so it's one that I don't feel comfortable in putting in pockets. You put it in your bag or whatever else versus, my all-purpose one's a nice thin knife that you slide into your pockets and you don't have
Yeah.
to worry about something poking you or
Just
anything
getting in the
else.
way.
So
I like those little belt clips too. Now that might be more of a guy thing, but I like that belt clip right there.
Yeah.
That's pretty nice. Now open that up. You mind if I handle your first deer knife right there?
I guess.
I was gonna say
You're pretty close to me. I don't know.
it's got a nice. It's got a really oversized handle.
thick handle,
Good
yeah.
grip. That thing is sticky. It's nice.
I don't think he washed the blood off from the last deer he killed.
Well, we'll just wipe it on the table here. We've already cut the table, so we can. But I mean, it looks like a nice stout blade. It's really usable.
Yep.
That's got a little drop point to it as well.
Yep, but it goes
Oh, that's
back
pretty
to the
cool.
fact of your
that-
drop point.
that
Just
drop
it's a
point,
stock. It's a
Been sharpened many times.
Mine's just a bigger version of that, basically. So, well, yours is probably like a
this is
3-inch knife,
two
2.5,
two and a half.
2.5-inch knife.
I know I had
yeah.
to keep track.
So
Anything over 3 inches is technically a concealed
And-
weapon if you're running around. So
Good thing I had
things for
concealed
law
carry.
enforcement.
there you go. And
Identify.
that's something I think that everybody should have is a knife or two that they just have a little bit of awe on, that has story behind it, that has some tradition, that has some thought, some stories behind it, and that type of stuff where you might not just bang it around. You make sure it's in that right pocket.
Right.
The correct pocket there on the hunting pack or in your camping outfit, whatever it might be. This one here has kind of got that story. This was given to me by my brother one Christmas, who is a much better deer hunter than I am, and I've kind of kept it right there. And I do use it quite a bit for deer, field dressing deer, as well as it's got a nice point there to help with skinning. It's got kind of a skinning point, but not perhaps as fancy as some by any means, but one that, like you said, the
good
story always has. And I made sure my kids had a nice knife. They've got a smaller trailsman buck knife for deer hunting, so that hopefully they have the same. But Jeff, I got to assume over there someplace is a story with behind a knife or two.
I got a lot of stories. And in fact, to me, some of my knives are just that. There's some stories, there's some relationships behind them. And so, and that's a big deal for me. This one here, as far as size goes and blades, this is probably one of my absolute favorite knives. And this is a Whitetails knife, which is a company that makes really good knives out of D2 steel, which is tool steel.
Hard steel.
They're hard, and once you get them sharp, they hold a blade for all season long, sometimes more. It takes a little work to get them there, and you're not just going to touch these up. But this has got a bone handle on or an antler handle on it, and it's just a really nice small size. I had to get this one because it had my name on it. You go to a store and it sees your name, you see your name on a knife, you're like, well, I better buy that one, right? And so I ended up buying that one. But nice leather sheath. I didn't buy it; it was given to me. But a nice leather sheath, which to me a leather sheath is always kind of a classy way of doing it. Here's one of my favorites. Back in the old days, we had an outstanding gentleman game warden up at Ponca named Eric Wiebe, and I considered him a good friend. And,
Mountain of a man.
Yeah, mountain of a man, and he helped start the Ponca Expo. He was instrumental in developing the shooting range up there. He was just a first-class guy. We lost him way too soon, but this is one of the knives he had made for me, and it's a D2 steel again. It's kind of I'll call it a butter swept blade, but it's a very nice utility knife. I do everything from boning out meat with this thing to camp chores or what have you. Real nice thick handle, really solid rigid blade. It's got what we call a nitrogen treatment on it, which gives it that real shiny look to it. But this is probably one of the better blades I've ever had on a knife, to be totally honest with you. This is another knife that a good friend of mine, probably my best friend. It's a gentleman that I've known since we were in the baby crib together, and he makes knives off and on. It's a Trent Smith knife, and it's got some antler and some wood, and it's just got this. Now you're going to notice my blades. I like small blades. These are elk hunting knives as far as I'm concerned. Moose hunting, deer, moose, elk. They'll do everything you need. But this one here, just one of the sharpest, slickest little blades I've ever had on a knife. A nice fat handle. The one thing again, for real serious work, there's no guard here. There's no dimple to stop your hand. So if you're doing a lot of work inside of a cavity, your hand could slip up on these types of blades.
Okay.
So you have to be a little cautious there. Love the sheath that he made for me, this basket weave. I don't know if people can see that, but I like designer sheath, nice leather sheaths and whatnot. And so a lot of stories. This is a knife that my brother had made for me. It's a Bone Collector series knife, and it's just got a really micarta type scales on the handle here. Gut hook. I'm a big gut hook guy. For deer hunting, there's nothing pretty about them. I think they're of the ugliest knives in the collection. Is a knife with a gut hook on it. Nothing pretty about a gut hook knife.
Really?
I just don't.
It just
think
breaks
so.
up the blade.
Yeah, it does. It just. But I'll tell you right now, when you're gutting deer, there's just nothing as handy as you make a little incision and turn that knife around and just zip that thing all the way up the chest cavity. It makes that chore pretty fast.
Slick.
And pretty slick.
Yeah,
Now,
it really
this,
does.
it's got a black leather sheath. This is probably, there's nothing fancy about this sheath other than it surely does hold the knife very well. And this one here is a knife of
Holds a
Alaska.
knife very well.
It does. It just holds it in there.
Does its job.
You can't. It does its job. It's an ugly sheath.
Utilitarian. Yeah.
Nothing pretty about it.
You got
but
a
it
pretty
does its
sheath
job.
and a
In this one
Get it
here,
done sheath.
my wife got this for me years ago. It's a Knives of Alaska knife. It's a little rubber handled knife, small 2.5-inch blade. I've done probably more deer with this knife than just about any of them. It's just a sweet little small game knife.
We're gonna get into purposes here real quick. I think it's a good thing to talk about. But before we do, I see there's still a couple knives that have gone untalked about. You've got one in a big sheath there, Kyle.
Yep.
We might have another mini machete
Call
here.
that
What do we
one
got?
King.
So again, this goes on to early on. I got using my smaller buck knife. It was working fine, but then we were getting to quartering out deer and doing that type of work out in the field. And then we kind of get to the fact of kind of nice to have something a little bit heavier, a little bit thicker knife. And so I explained that to my cousin. And then he comes back with this knife for me for Christmas.
Oh,
And
okay.
so
I like
then-
cousins.
then,
I like cousins a
So
little
now
bit.
this is turned into, we take this with us when we go out, especially if we know it's early season, you want to quarter out deer pretty fast and get them cooled down, or even if
there you
it's
go.
later season and it's easier sometimes for me just to quarter out all the deer. And
I was gonna say that's got more spine to it. That's got a little bit
That's
more
got
metal, a
some
little
heft.
stiffer. Yeah.
You can use that as a hammer, or
You can-
take break camp with that thing.
So,
Cut some
but
branches with that.
I also like it for the fact of you don't have to go digging through pockets. Like I said, the nice part about putting it on your belt there is you just have it there ready to
Oh, there
go.
you
And so
go.
you just, as you're going through, you just undo the snap real fast and you're ready to go. I like
a fan.
efficiency, if you can't tell.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Now, one thing I'm going to show, and this I cheated, guys. This is not a knife necessarily. This is a modified hack saw.
Poor
blade
man's chainsaw.
right here, right there. The old Sagan saw for breaking the pelvic bone. If you want to do that when you're field dressing a big game critter like a deer or going through the rib cage. I don't like messing around with my knives. It's kind of like you have the nice one that you got, your first buck knife for processing deer. There's times where you're kind of like, I'm going to be a little protective of that.
It's a heavy
I don't want it. I don't want to break it. I don't want it to bust. I don't want to get dings in it. So why use it in some of those rough spots? So I got
Feel
that.
the heft on that thing. That's an axe.
Yeah.
That thing could chop down trees.
Yeah. So which side do you wear this on?
That one, I would wear it on my left side.
Left side, your strong side.
No.
That's right. That's his kicking side. When he was a field goal kicker in high school, folks, that was the sweep right there. That thing would go.
Davey Bowie would be like, "That's a nice knife." Right
There you go.
So, going off of your bone saw talk, that's the other one I do have in my hunting pack with me when I go deer hunting. I cut up in the rib cage completely, and when I gut out my deer. So
easy way to do it. Now you've got a multi-tool there too. This
Yes.
might be the smallest, most compact knife we have on the table, folks.
Yep. My story behind this one, where it really came in very popular, was I was actually out. I carry around with me when I go hunting, but then it was actually when I was out in the sandhills hunting, and then my dog found a porcupine while we're out there. And of course, what does my dog do? Jump headfirst into it.
Oh man,
Got to protect this.
So
that's no good.
Protect Kyle.
we got that situation solved, but then of course now got a dog with a nose full of needles and a paw full of needles. So as in pretty much me and my grandpa, one holds the dog down, but then we just pull. Then get to your Leatherman, start pulling out those versus trying to get it with your hands or anything else. So that's been the biggest use when hunting. But I've had other uses too. But on top of it, you still have your little saw on the side and also your normal knife. Like I said, there has a whole bunch of different purposes through it. Just a little basic tiny Leatherman.
Can I see that?
Nice and compact.
And one thing I'm going to toss out here, folks, is usually you get what you pay for when it comes to any type of knife, but multi-tools especially. Mm-hmm. There are a lot of real cheap multi-tools that are just that, and then there's some well-made ones, and you're definitely going to like when you need it and need to put it to use, you're going to definitely wish you spent the money for the good ones. That looks like a nice one. And you bring up a story. I, too, once I started chasing our prairie grouse here in Nebraska, sharp-tailed grouse and greater prairie chickens, I found the need for carrying a multi-tool on my belt and wearing leather gloves. Because if you're not dealing with porcupine quills, there's spots that have sandburrs and all sorts of other things, cacti and things like that. So that's pretty darn awesome. All right. So now I know a lot of listeners like, oh, this is all great talk and those are pretty cool knives and all that type of stuff. But what knife do you use for fill in the blank? So we're going to go with that. So here's what you're going to do. You've got the knife sitting in front of you. And Michael, if you need to borrow one of Jeff's knives, do it covertly. And I think we're going to start with, here I'm going to present something that requires a knife. You grab the knife that you would grab in that situation that's sitting on a table. And we'll start right off the top. You're successful this fall. You shoot a deer. Now it's time to field dress it. What knife are you grabbing? Boy, it didn't take you long at all, Jeff. You got that one your brother made for you.
Yeah,
Depends on which step it is. I mean,
that's
what it is. That's what I'm like going through. I'm like, well, depends on which process I'm in or which knife I'm using.
Here in eastern Nebraska, you're pretty close to the parking lot or the truck.
For just to get the guts out.
So this is.
I had another.
And then bringing out knives.
You got a whole case now.
No,
Bring
you
the
can't
case.
add knives late in the game just to suit your needs.
Sure, I can.
All right, so you can see, folks, if you're watching on YouTube, we've got a couple of gut hooks out there. The white-tailed knife. What's that one called? I think those are all labeled.
It's a Skinner.
Skinner, and then we've got the buck knife from Kyle, the first knife. All right, so you get the deer field dressed. When you get home, let's say you're going to process that deer yourself. Do you have a knife in front of you that you're going to use to skin that deer? Went with the all-purpose. What do you call that? The butter?
I call it a butter swept blade.
Butter
blade or a swept blade. You can see how the blade sweeps up like that.
Yep.
And it just makes a nice little, almost like a ulu type edge that doesn't it won't cut through the hide and into the meat very easily, but it does separate the hide from the meat.
That swept curve, that's where you see on a lot of skinning knives is that, because all you got to do is kind of cut that skin that membrane that's holding it to the meat. Yep. All right, we got a couple there. Your multi-purpose one with that kind of curve back on the blade. You went with your drop point.
Yeah,
your favorite.
Yeah, I could pull out another one of that box there, but I won't.
You guys are making fun of me. He's got like another dozen in there.
I can use this one just as well too.
That was an official case he had for, not just a bag. It's an official case, which each one has a assigned location.
That's one on the workbench. All right, so you got the skin off that deer. If you're going to debone it, what knife are you going for? Fillet knives, yep.
I would steal somebody's fillet knife. I didn't bring mine with me.
Yeah, I was going to say, you can fillet knife.
Jeff's he's probably got a couple more over here somewhere.
Going to that bag of fun over there.
There you go. All right, that's the one neat thing. I think some people are shocked, like, wait a second, that's a fishing knife. Why you deboning a deer with that? Because it works well.
You get it close to the bone and get all that meat off.
It works well. All right, turkey season just got over. You shot a big tom. What are you using to clean that turkey with? Back to the fillet knives.
Yep.
Pretty much.
I might do a meat cleaver just for the
I will say if we're going after the legs and breaking that joint down there, I might switch up to this knife real quick.
There you go.
99% of that bird's getting done with the fillet knife.
Yep, that's a good point, because if you're saving the feet or the spurs or something like that, that's a good one. Or having to get that thigh meat out of there.
Yeah, pop that ball joint.
That's right. Now we'll go smaller bird, pheasants or grouse. Are you switching the blade that you're going to use or knife you're going to use, or are you going to stick with the fillet knife?
Fillet knife.
Yeah, probably still fillet knife.
And that's probably where I've gone with some really short fillet knives that have a little bit of flex. Flex is important. You hit that on that already, Jeff. So that's good. Squirrel knife. Which one's your squirrel knife?
This little guy right here has probably done as much as anything. So this is probably, because squirrels, I'm not filleting meat off the bones usually. Usually I'm just opening and skinning and quartering. And this little guy right here is what I've had with me a lot of times for that. And so I would say, in the old days, it was all kinds of different knives. But, in the last 15 years or so, it's probably this one right here.
There you go. I always think of squirrel knives as pocket knives material. I don't know why. And Jeff, you mentioned the gut hook on those, and I know you've got a knife there that has it as well, Michael. Yep. That kind of little cutting edge. It goes in opposite direction, usually on the back spine of the blade. Very useful, especially when they're nice and sharp. And I know there's some knives, what is that called? The Montana skinning knife or whatever, that actually has just a razor blade that you replace in there. Very, very useful. The one blade that you'll sometimes see, especially on pocket knives, is called a bird gut hook. I can't find any use for that at all. You guys know what I'm talking about? It pops out and it's got just a curve. It's not sharpened at all. It's just a rounded point.
It goes about that long on a pocket knife, and it's just got a hook, and it's just a kind of a steel hook. Yeah, and I think obviously the intended purpose was when you opened up that bird, you just stick it in there and twist it around and just yank out all the guts. And then you got a perfectly nice, beautiful pocket knife, just all gutty and icky, Yeah, and but I found a use for one. I really did. What I did was I took a pair of pliers and I cut the hook off. I just snapped it off, and then I filed that thing down into an awl. And that has been one of the most useful tools, that having a pointy thing. And I have it so pointed, so filed down that I can remove slivers out of my finger with it, poke through leather, poke through wood, start a screw hole with it, whatever. But that little awl that I made out of that thing, that son of a gun is useful. Every knife should come with, every pocket knife should come with an awl.
There you go. Yeah, it makes sense to me. You're at times wanting to poke holes in things, or need to find something to tie off to, and a hole would be darn useful. I can't think of any other critters that we need to cover. Ducks, geese, kind of same vein as turkeys and pheasants that we talked about. I'm not changing up my knife necessarily, just probably a little bit in the technique, especially how their breast meat lays out and the bones in that. So let's go camping. Yeah. If you need to cut rope, all right, and oftentimes when you cut rope, it's one of those things that knife's handy. So I'm going to ask this differently. Which knives are you not going to use to cut rope?
The meat cleaver.
Yeah, I was going to say the meat cleaver. He didn't. Michael did not rule out the butcher knife there.
I could see a situation where if it's a thick enough rope, I might want to use it, but probably using this one.
You could probably heat that butcher knife up, and it would just cut through that, especially like nylon rope, just cut right out and kind of seal the edges as well.
Probably could.
If you go camping, if you had an ideal camping knife, what are you looking for?
Something like this little guy right here is just a great little utility.
Strong blade.
Yep, strong blade. A lot of, for things like cutting rope, I like surface area. I like a little bit of length of the blade to it. So many times, like pocket knives, 1, 2, 3, there's just not enough surface blade to actually slice through it. But a bigger, heavier knife, you pull that rope and you pull that knife across, and it just slices right through it. And so this is just an all-around good utility knife, so I really like this one. My Eric Wiebe knife is a really good utility knife, and so a lot of times in camp I've had this one on as well. Any of these will work, but I do like a little bit bigger blade than this little small one I call my game blade.
And one of the nice things about those fixed blades is one is not going to come back on you. And if you do go with one of the folding knives, make sure you get a good, strong, quality folding knife that locks in place, kind of like what you have there, Kyle. I've been cut by some of those things, not when closing, to be honest with you, because it wants to snap back closed, and you've got to kind of watch your fingers there. We're going to get into sharpness here, but Jeff, before we do, we forgot one other piece. I didn't see that down there.
Really, as you can see, mine gets used, but a really good, useful tool is your game shears. And these are really handy for game birds, really handy for squirrels. Cut the feet off and whatnot, the head, feet, and tail. These are just kind of slick. And set like these, and this is that frost. Outdoor edge deal. But this one's kind of a unique one. You take the screw out, and this is a knife, and which is kind of a slick deal. It's a sharp bladed, one sided bladed knife, and so, but this one almost it rubs against the other one, almost sharpens itself every time you use it. But it's a really slick little deal. And of course, it comes closed, has a nice little Cordura sheath. But I use these off and on quite a bit. Yeah.
A couple of tips on those folks, like you said, it's only if they're pruners. Or pruning shears, they'd be bypass, I guess would be the style rather than the anvil. But there's got a little groove there for popping those bones. It really does help quite a bit. But be careful, because when you're bringing those two sides together on the back end, and you need to give a little oomph, it's not unheard of for you to get your finger in the wrong spot back there on the handle and squeezing them and pinching them pretty good when all of a sudden that bone or hard surface pops. And that one there, if I remember right, kind of it locks together down there at the bottom, so you got an extra little piece of metal that comes together. But boy, you talk about useful.
These are, and I used to use pruning shears years ago.
I think Stan does.
Those worked okay, but these, and you're right, that little bone
notch or whatever,
you get in there, and it just they're slick. I'm a big believer in these. A friend of mine turned me on to these back when I was in college, and I was like, man, that's handy. We were going through pheasants. It's like clip, 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 and you're ready to go. And God darn, that's handy.
So we talked about it at the beginning of the show, folks, and this is a spot. Hopefully you're following along with this still. A dull knife is basically a piece of, like any other piece of metal. It's just going to frustrate you and get in the way and cause some problems, if nothing else. So it's got to be sharp. So we're going to go over some quick ways of keeping them sharp, of a couple of different things. Before we get there, though, Jeff, because this is something I don't think a lot of folks really think about, is these knives, they all have steel blades, but they're not the same steel. They're made different densities, different carbon rates, different hardness factors, and all that type of stuff. And that's why folks sometimes, hey, I did this with one knife and it just came out razor sharp. I did it with this other knife, nothing. Yeah. And why is this knife dull so much faster after 2 or 3 cuts, where this one here just keeps going? Boy, talk a little bit about that.
Sure. There's a lot of different metal out there, and I'm not trying to, sway people one way or the other. There's some cheap metal that you can buy from overseas and whatnot. And generally speaking, American-made knives use really good, sharp, hard steel. The average standard is the 440 stainless, and that's what most knives are probably made out of that are made in the United States. And there's good reason for it. They're kind of that good in between. They're not so hard that the average person can't touch them up with a stone or a carbide blade or something like that. But they're not so soft that that they dull. Cut the first rope and then they're dull, And I've had knives like that were just absolutely worthless. And again, it's kind of the carbon content within the blade making giving it the rigidity and the hardness. You go all the way up to something like D2 steel, And there's harder blades, but you get too hard, and of course you got breakage and shatter that you got to worry about too. But D2 steel is probably one of my absolute favorites. You just have to know that the average person isn't going to just touch it up. It's going to take a little bit of a trick, like some type of sharpening station, your work tool there, or what have you, to get these things sharpened up. But once they're sharpened, man, they're sharp and they hold an edge. And so it's my favorite. Then the angle of the blade's important, right? If you have a really a softer steel, and then you have a really shallow angle to it, what happens is it'll be razor sharp, and that's kind of what razor blades are like. They're softer, and then they've got a really shallow angle to them, and they make the sharpest blade. But after a few uses, they're dull. They've already started to wear off. And so, you can change the blade on your knife if you've got a knife that you keep having to sharpen. You can't change the steel. So what do? Well, you can change that blade, get a little more severe angle of the blade that might hold a little bit better edge for a longer time. So there's that.
And when you're talking angle, you're talking the angle of the sharp edge.
Right on the sharp edge there.
Not the angle of the blade itself.
Nope, not
that cutting edge.
Right along the edge here, you'll just see there's this honed part right along the edge. And of course, most people see that as, oh yeah, it looks sharp, because it's kind of honed all along the edge there. And that edge there's an angle to it. Most knives are going to be that 20 to 30 degree type angle, but there's a little bit of an angle to it. And some have a really shallow angle, and some have a really deep angle to them based on the type of steel and the blade.
Right, and the purpose as well. The fillet knife's going to have a different angle to its cutting edge as a field dressing knife.
Correct. This one's got a real shallow angle, and it's going to be razor sharp. But I'm not, like you said earlier in the show, I'm not cutting bone and wings necessarily with it all the time. I'm using this for filleting meat off the bones, and so I'm usually not touching anything hard that's going to change that blade. Whereas some of these bigger, thicker steel knives, I'm going through deer. I'm working around the joints on the shoulders or the pelvic bones and whatnot. And there's going to be times where these are going to get a little more tool type use to them, and they're going to hold a little bit better blade.
There you go. So that's something to keep in mind. Now, I'm also going to toss this out before we get into the process. Two different things. You've heard us use the term sharpening a knife and honing a knife. And this is the definition I go by. We also heard setting the edge, so to speak. Honing is kind of that, just keeping a knife sharp.
Yep.
Keeping that edge that you're talking about, that angle, so that it's in line and ready to go. And that's kind of the maintenance of a knife. And sometimes that's all it takes. On fillet knives, you cut, make a few strokes, whether you're deboning deer or filleting a walleye or something like that. If you're not going through bone, no problem. Just keep it lined up. That's a little bit different, a little quicker, as into resetting the edge, or what I think of when it comes to sharpening. You're actually putting a brand new edge on it. And so we're going to kind of use that. There's all sorts of different tools and techniques out there that you will find at the local store or online talking about it. But we're going to go through our favorites to kind of help, because I think once you realize it's not as complicated or mystery filled as what we sometimes think it is, you're going to sharpen your knives more often, and you're going to enjoy that knife a lot longer as well. So we're going to start first. I mean, I got this little machine, which is pretty straightforward, but you've got this whole bench top. I'm shocked we don't have it clamped down or drilled through the table here in the Hunt Nebraska cabin. What is that?
It's a Work Sharp precision adjust system. And I am terrible with whetstones. And I've tried using whetstones, and I'm not good. I can't keep the edge right. I've tried a few different sharpening systems, and I saw some YouTube videos about systems like this there a year or two ago, and I bought it, and I really like it because I can do everything from my hunting knives, my pocket knives, even all the way down to my little pocket knife here. I can do that on this.
Jeff wants you to
and I can show us how you put an edge on a pocket knife. Wait, please.
That one might be a little difficult to do. That one's pretty thin.
You can do it.
You'd have to get it.
So you
get it out
put it
there
on that clamp.
Yep, you put it on the clamp, and then you tighten.
Gotta
tighten it up.
Yep.
Folks, you're gonna want to see this in video. We might have to get some up closes.
This is pretty slick. So you got the knife clamped. How do you determine the angle on this, something like that?
So to get your angle, and
Still tightening it up.
Your knife's pretty thin. So to get the angle, you take your arm here, and you kind of set it down.
And on the bottom of that arm, there is it a whetstone or is it a?
It's
steel?
Yeah. So comes with these
ceramic.
comes with these bars. Yep, I've just got the ceramic bar on here. Comes with these
bar.
plates, and it'll have like your stones. So it'll have different stone grits.
Magnetic on it, so you can
Yep.
do a coarse or a fine or.
Yep.
It's a real fine one.
This one's just your ceramic honing blade. And what you'll do is you got a little electronic level on here, so you just turn it on. Make sure it's zeroed. Then you put it on here, and it'll tell you the angle that your bar's at, and then you've got this little
No way.
twist knob
No way.
that you can adjust.
Father's Day is
How
coming.
Do you know where you're? Yeah, no kidding. How do you know where you're adjusting that thing?
So this number right here. So now it's at 17 degrees. So I'm not sure what the angle of your little knife is here. And honestly, it might not stick out far enough for me
It
to.
might not be
I
enough.
think you're
adjust
just
it.
sharpening the top of the clamp.
It does come with a small knife.
Here, try a fillet knife.
Adapter.
Try something a little
Table.
bit bigger. Yeah.
It does come with a small knife table
Well,
that
here,
you can use.
everyone's getting their knife sharpened at me. This has an
Setting an
there we go.
edge. Just one of those needs
Bunch
it
of crap. My
bad.
fillet knife was next
It just
in line.
needs some honing anyway.
There we go. So
But as you can see, folks,
You can
nobody feels like they have mastered the art of sharpening. Now we do. We have all kinds of tools that we use to sharpen them. Some use or take off more metal than you'd like. But so this is you're setting the edge.
You don't have to get nearly as a fancy. I just like using this one because I can use it on all my knives, from my hunting knives to my kitchen knives. I've sharpened a few of my kitchen knives with this, and I did that probably 8-10 months ago, and I still haven't had to do anything to those
How do
knives.
you know what edge you're going for? How do you know what?
So
I mean, as you adjust that, that's going to change.
So kind of a gut hook or a buck knife like this one's generally going to have a steeper angle. If you're setting the edge, obviously you're just going to decide what edge you want to go with. If you can find what edge it came from the factory, then you just match that angle. But on a lot of my knives, what I've done, especially with those kitchen knives of mine, I just went and set a new edge on them with this. Did it like 15, 17 degrees or something like that. But yeah, you just set your edge. We'll just do 25 for honing it.
So how does that tell you what edge? We probably take this off the air, but I'm getting an education
It's
here.
intriguing.
Yeah.
Now, did I hear somebody say you don't have to do this? You don't have to go this complex?
You don't have to go
All right,
this
we're going to edit
complex.
that out. And dear, don't pay any attention. It's Michael. We do need to do something like this. And you're just rubbing it back and forth.
You're not putting
Yeah.
much pressure on there at all.
Nope, you don't have to put a lot of pressure on there at all.
I'm seeing an edge form. I can tell it's honing,
So
getting nice and shiny at least.
basically, folks, what is going on here is he mentioned the whetstone, and we see the old block of
I've used those
different
many
grit.
times,
You
yeah.
know, there's all sorts of them nowadays. Ceramic being one of the finest, if you will, kind of a great honing one. But there's coarse rocks, there's medium grit rock, and all that type of stuff. And it is, you have to get the angle right. You've got water in some cases, or honing oil in another, to get those metal shavings, because you're actually taking pieces of that knife blade off the knife, and you got to float those away so they don't get hinder the process. And now he's flipping it over. This is pretty cool.
Yep, you just flip it over.
That
You know,
is-
Hershey, you
that's
and I
pretty
could go
cool.
together on one of
Yeah,
these.
I think so.
Like
Borrow it.
one for the office sounds
Every
really
other
good.
week we have shared custody. But and what is going on, and I've seen some others not near as fancy as this, but that you still got that aspect of the whetstone, the sharpening stone. But now it's taken all the guesswork out of angle. It's taken all the guesswork out of, am I getting a full stroke on it or not? This one here tells you exactly what you're doing and allows you to maintain that, because that's something that can happen. Is if you don't know how to use a whetstone right, you can actually get a nice sharp edge and then roll it right
That's
over
right. That's
and
right.
and get dings,
Which is what
and
I've
dents and
always
everything
done
else.
with my whetstones.
and that's sets you back. You can actually dull a knife that way.
There you go.
Holy smokes!
Huh, that was interesting.
Thank you, Michael. That is pretty cool.
Well, anyhow, yeah.
And and this one, the neat thing about this one, it's got a nice sturdy base, but you can also bolt it down to like a workbench, and
Yeah.
just have a little sharpening station set up.
Send the kid out there.
But yeah, no, you definitely don't have to. You don't have to get a system like this. Whether you got your grinder right there. They make cheaper versions of this sort of system too.
No,
but
they don't. You're not helping me at all. Father's Day's coming here.
Yeah, no
As we tape this.
Well, no, this is actually the base model Hershey. Top of the line, way more.
Yeah, we got to spend that.
But yeah, it's a nice.
Remember, it is Father's Day.
Might need an office sharpener.
There you go.
I agree with that.
These systems are great for if you're wanting to take, like you said, a lot of the guesswork out of it, and want to make sure you can maintain that consistent edge. And you might pay a little more up front, but over the long haul, you can use it for just about any knife you got, and keep your knife blades lasting a lot longer. So that's why I like this one.
This one here, this one's been around for quite a while. This is also happens to be a work sharp, and I don't know the name right off the top of me. But it's basically almost like a little sander. You've got different types of these thin strips that are similar to those whetstones and honing stones and like that. It's almost like a sandpaper, but made out of different stuff. It's you plug it in and it spins that while you put your blade in the guide there to get the right angle. Now you can take that off and do it freehand if you want to, which is a little difficult for some. This thing goes pretty fast. I think you can also take the whole guard off and use it to sharpen hatchets.
That's what I've used mine for,
and things like that.
More blades and hatchets.
You do have to be careful. There's a little wiggle room with these. Those fine strips of the honing strips, if you will, they don't last a whole long time, but they really can put an edge on it. But what you do have to be careful for is fillet knives. Because what it's doing is it is going fast and it's taking a lot of the edge off quicker than just about anything else, is all of a sudden that nice pointy tip on that fillet knife, which is very useful for making a first incision on a lot of different things, can disappear.
Yep.
I've got some that it's just like, oh, wow, it's turning red, and then it went. And so you got to be kind of careful. Very good. They're real popular. Not quite as expensive as that, but it does have a little wiggle room in there. And this is the one we happen to have here in our office that we use to do for a lot of our Becoming an Outdoors Woman program, new hunter events, youth mentor hunts, and that type of stuff. I know this one's already gone long. We appreciate you guys being with us. Real quick, though, those pocket honers and knife sharpeners can be good, right? Right there.
Those are great. Yep. Especially in the field when you're just touching up your knife.
And these are handy. They come in a lot of pocket sizes. We got one, I think Hunter Ed gave one out several years ago that I've still got, which is kind of nice. You do have a place to sharpen and actually take an edge off. Just make sure you get those shavings, that steel shavings that you're taking off the knife out of there. And then the honing side. That's what some of the fillet knives used to always come with, Jeff.
Yeah,
those little ceramic
They do,
bars.
and these are nice. And carbide tips or carbide blades really put a nice edge on a knife, but they do remove some steel. You'll see a lot of little filings and whatnot. They take off a lot of steel, and I've especially this fillet knife, I've gone through some metal on some of those.
What's the lifespan of one of these things? 'Cause I've noticed some of them are, especially like the what happens is you'll use that fine or the honing side of it, and you probably need something a little bit more aggressive, and so it kind of fills it up and it turns it kind of silver stained, if you will, or like you said, you get a chip in there. So they don't last forever.
Nope.
So keep an eye on that. But what would you say, something like that? How long would that last?
It'll last you years. I mean, it depends on what your job is and what you're using knives for. But for the average person, this probably lasts you a lifetime. I mean, it just depends on how much you sharpen your knife. Most people don't sharpen their knives, every other day. And so, a few times a year that they use their knife sharpener, for a lot of folks, these things will last a long, long time. Like you said, those carbide, they're strong. I mean, that's got to cut metal, so they're pretty strong. So something like this lasts a long, long time. But once you get a little chip or a nick in there, and that usually comes from, like, you nail it, not cleaning it out. You got all these filings in there, and then you put another knife blade that might be a heavier blade and a thicker blade on there, and it rubs those filings into that carbide tip, and then all of a sudden you get little nicks in there. Well, that's just going to be what's going to happen to your knife. So I got a little toothbrush, and I just kind of, it's got Crest toothpaste on it, so it smells really good, and so I clean it out. Yeah, so it works really well. But make sure you rinse off the toothbrush before you use it.
Before put it back for your wife.
Yeah. So,
all right, we're kind of over time on this. We might explore this area a little bit more. But if you got any questions, thoughts, ideas, make sure you type them down in the comments below and give us a thumbs up, subscribe, so you know when each and every one of these is brought to you on whatever listening or viewing channel you might have. But until next time, we'll see you outdoors.
Hunt Nebraska, brought to you by your Nebraska Game and Parks Commission.